Well, good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks for joining today's webinar. I'm Gavin Tiefel, and with me today is Brent Rudderman to run through the COVID-19 support package, Unmasked. And as the name implies, making sense of the New South Wales Government's COVID initiatives. This has been a challenging rollout. It was initially something they rolled out, probably expecting a fairly short lockdown of a week or two, but it's had to be adjusted and built on the fly somewhat and changed to cope with the grip of the lockdown and the pandemic that we now find ourselves in. So there's quite a few initiatives on offer, which we'll endeavour to step through. It's been very challenging to get clear direction from Service New South Wales as to the initiatives and the detail of applying them. It's been rolled out quickly and advice has been somewhat spasmodic coming through from them, but our endeavour in today's webinar is to really make sense of the initiatives and to look at them in practicality and applying them and claiming them in your business. So Brent, what's on offer?
Thanks, Gavin. Yeah, there's a bit of detail there, and to try and we'll run through it now. But there will be some slides and handouts available after with the detail in it. So we'll send those through straight at the end. So just to quickly summarise the agenda for now, because we've got a couple of grants from the New South Wales. So we've got the COVID-19 business grant. That's a one-off grant of $7,500, $10,500 and $15,000. We've also got the JobSaver payment, so that's the cash flow support for businesses to help them maintain their employee headcount. And then we've also got the micro business grant, and that is a fortnightly payment of $1,500 to cover business expenses for the duration of the Greater Sydney lockdown. There is other grants that have come out from other states as they go through multiple lockdowns and different versions of that, which we can provide information for on request, but we're mainly just focusing on the New South Wales grant at the moment. That's from New South Wales Government. We've also got the federal government as well, who are assisting with the COVID disaster payment, and that is aimed at individuals. So that's a support payment for workers that have been affected by a public health order. That's what we'll be running through. So Gavin, do you want to run through the eligibility for the COVID-19 business grant and how you can get it?
Sure, no problem, Brent. So COVID-19 business grant, as Brent's indicated, it is a one-off grant that is broken down into an amount of $7,500, $10,500 or $15,000. The main eligibility pieces are fairly straightforward, that you need to have had an ABN to demonstrate that your business was operating at the 1st of June. Our turnover range for this is between 75,000 and 50 million. So it can be accessed by many of our businesses. And the gross wages bill of no more than $10 million per year. The business also must be able to prove a 30% reduction in revenue as a result of the public health order over a minimum 2-week period, which we'll discuss further shortly. And the business must also maintain its employee headcount as of the 13th of July. Now, when we say maintain employee headcount, it doesn't mean that you can't stand staff members down. They can be stood down, and a staff member can leave of their own accord and terminate employment. That doesn't affect it. But if you as an employer terminate a staff member, access to this initiative is then lost. And then finally, eligibility is also, it can be claimed for non-employing businesses, providing that business is your primary income source. So for example, that covers the dad and mum partnership and sole traders and that kind of thing. So once we're eligible, as we just outlined, depending on the reduction in turnover, that dictates whether we get 7.5, 10.5, or $15,000 as a one-off payment from the state government. So the question then is to how do we get it? So broadly, it involves going off to Service New South Wales and creating a business account with them. We have to confirm some details and upload some identity documents. Then declining turnover information needs to be submitted to them as well. And it's also required that evidence is submitted of the reduction in turnover. Now, that is usually in the form of a letter from an accountant or other supplying documents as they may request. Then in terms of they that miss out, mainly it's non-employing businesses if the proprietors are already accessing the COVID disaster payment. And then the other entities that won't receive it are entities that are purely for investment type purposes. For example, an entity that might own a property that's rented out, for example, won't be able to claim the payment. So cover that off, Brent?
Yeah, that's a good summary. So the next initiative we want to run through was just the COVID-19 JobSaver payment. So once again, same sort of format, eligibility. So eligibility, there's a couple of things in there, and obviously these eligibility are put in place to ensure that only those that need it are getting it. Now, for this initiative or this grant, we need to have an ABN. We need to have been operating in New South Wales on 1 June 2021. We need to have an aggregated annual turnover between 75,000 and 250 million for the year ended June 2020. We need to have experienced a declining turnover of 30% or more due to the public health order, and that's over a minimum 2-week period within the Greater Sydney lockdown. So that is a period that commenced 26 June and currently due to end 28th of August. And we can compare that 2-week period to either the same period in 2019 or the same period in 2020 or the 2-week period immediately before lockdown commenced. So that's between 12 June and 25th of June 2021. So Gavin, feel free to jump in at any point here to, for any comments, particularly just for frequently asked questions that are coming through. Now, this payment is for employing businesses, and it's really designed to help maintain your employee headcount from 13 July 2021 while you continue to receive these JobSaver payments. Now, for non-employing businesses, such as sole traders, we need to show that the business is our primary income source for the associated person that's claiming. So if you have more than one non-employing business, you can only claim payments for one business. So that's the eligibility. So how much do we get? So the payment is just equivalent to 40% of our weekly payroll for work performed in New South Wales. So the minimum payment will be $1,500 per week. So that is, one person, right up to maximum of 100K a week. Now, how do we apply? Once again, we just need to have our My Service New South Wales account, which you can create when you start your application. We'll need a proof of identity, provide our ABN, provide our bank account details, evidence of our annual turnover and how it's reduced. We'll need a copy of a tax return, and then you'll need to supply your tax agent details as well. You'll need to confirm a few details, select your verification documents, and upload those. Provide your declining turnover information, upload any evidence, which can include an accountant's letter, and work through the questions and then submit it. Now, once again, in terms of those that could miss out, it's a non-employing businesses. So if anyone associated with the business or derives income from it has received a COVID disaster payment since 18 July 2021. And then also entities that are only earning investment type income, such as rent and dividends. Now, we have so far, responses from Services New South Wales have been taking a long time. Applications are taking a long time to process. So it's just something to bear in mind when you do that application. Does that we've got a few questions coming through, so we will address those at the end. But Gavin, does that cover the COVID-19 JobSaver payment?
Yeah, it does, Brent. That's a good outline. As you would have noticed, both of these initiatives really hinge on the declining turnover test being passed, which is the 30%, or for the business grant, up to 50 or 70%. We thought we'd just give a bit more background to that. So the broad rules are that particularly for the business grant, was that there must have been a decline in turnover of 30% or more due to the public health order from the 26th of June to the 17th of July. Now that's a 21-day period, which can be compared to the same period in 2019, or the same period in 2020, or the 2-week period immediately before the lockdown commenced in Sydney. So from the 12th of June to the 25th of June. Now, what that means is that we've got to start by calculating the current or the test turnover, which can be for any period of 2 weeks between a date specified. So, for example, it could be for the full 21-day period that we look at to establish a current turnover, or it could be for any number of days between 14 and 21 days, between 26 June and 17 July, or it can be any fortnight period within the 21 days. So, for example, it could be days 1 to 14, or 2 to 15, or 3 to 16, and so on. So, in effect, what it means is that there's actually 35 different date combinations that could potentially be used, which has obviously added a degree of complexity to the turnover test calculation, which on the face of it sounds simple, but actually isn't. So the main objective in doing this is that in using the methods that we've just run through, that we have the lowest turnover showing for the current period. Now, that needs to then be compared to a comparative turnover test, which again can be a 14-day period in the 2-week period immediately prior to the lockdown. Otherwise, the same date range in 2020, or the same date range in 2019. So obviously we have the option to pick the comparative dates that are going to give us the best chance of being eligible for one of the concessions. So there is a lot of moving parts to this, in the sense of trying to establish dates that are in keeping with the rules, but dates that are going to work to give us the result that we're looking for. With JobSaver, it works broadly off the same decline in turnover test, whereby we're looking at a 2-week period compared to the 2 weeks prior to the lockdown or previous 2 years. The only distinction there is that the JobSaver initiative, the dates for that aren't set in stone like the dates are for the business grant. So the business grant, the test period for that is 26 June 21 to 17th of July 21. The JobSaver initiative, the dates for that are still going. So what that means is that you may be in a position where business has rolled on and turnover hasn't specifically reduced yet, or it might be about to, until the reduction in turnover has actually materialised. There's no eligibility for the JobSaver initiative. A lot of us probably recall last year when a JobKeeper regime was rolled out, there was the ability to make a claim based on forecast sales. With the JobSaver initiative, there's no ability to claim based on a forecast of what you know is going to happen to your turnover. The turnover reduction must have materialised, and we must be able to historically prove that before we can pass the turnover test and access the grant. Now, these dates and percentages and comparisons and so on, we will include those in the slides when we send those out, and in the attached documents that come with that.
Thanks,
So that brings us, Brent, to the initiative of the COVID disaster payment. Would you be able to just run us through that one?
Yeah, thanks for that. The decline in turnover test, the mind really boggles. But we'll run through some examples just to try and help understand how that's worked out. But before we do, I just want to run through that COVID disaster payment. So this relates to the grants we just run through relate to businesses, and they're provided by the New South Wales government. This COVID disaster payment relates to individuals claiming grants, and this is administered by the federal government. So eligibility for that is we need to be an Australian resident or hold a visa that gives the right to work in Australia. We need to be over 17. We need to make sure we're not getting any other sort of income support payment, things like dad and partner pay, parental leave pay, job seeker, and so on. We also need to ensure we're not getting the pandemic leave disaster payment or any other state or territory pandemic payment. We also need to have lost hours of work, so at least 8 hours, and also income due to a lockdown in the state. And also we don't have any other pandemic related leave entitlements. So how much do we get? So if we've lost between 8 and 20 hours of work for that week, we get up to $450,000, and that is aimed at casuals. Now, if we've lost a full day of our usual work hours for that week, then we'll get up to $450, and that's related to sort of part-time and full-time employees. Now, if we've lost 20 hours of work or more for that week, we'll get up to $750 a week. Now, how do we get it? We're able to apply via MyGov. So jump in there, select apply for support from the government, and from the government support for coronavirus alert. Under affected by coronavirus, we select get started. We select apply for COVID-19 disaster payment, answer the eligibility and claim questions, and then we submit our claim. Just a note on this one, you're not required to take any of these types of leaves before accessing the payments. That includes annual leave, unpaid leave, paid sick and carers leave, long service leave, compassionate leave, when your employer has stood you down without pay. Now, these claims, as we said, are getting processed by MyGov, and they're usually coming through within a reasonable time frame. So that was our 3 main grants we wanted to run through. So to help sort of put all that together, we've got a few examples here. So Gavin, do you want to run through the examples?
Yeah, no problem, Brent. Thanks for that. Thanks for that overview. That's good. So putting all these initiatives together, we thought the best way to do this was to come up with an example, which is on the screen now. Sorry, there's a bit of text there. And if any of these names are real life names, that's purely coincidence. So what we've got is fictitious business, City Electrical Services, run by Director John Smith, and they primarily operate in Western Sydney. Employ 8 staff members, gross wages are $11,500 per week. And once the lockdown was announced on the 26th of June, business halved. They couldn't get to half their sites, and turnover dropped by over 50% immediately in comparison to the previous fortnight being 11 June to 25th of June. So subsequently, all staff members were stood down, including the director, awaiting the lockdown to lift so that they could keep going. So what benefits can they apply for? So firstly, we know straight off that they have satisfied the turnover reduction of 30%, and that can be proven between 26 June and 17 July. So as a result, they're going to be able to get the business grant, and they will receive $10,500 there because they can prove that there was a reduction of 50% or more. Had reduction have been between 30 and 50, they would have got 7.5. And of course, the grant where we're at more than 70% of downturn comes in at 15. So no questions there about the small business grant. Once again, as they've achieved a 30% reduction, and that can be proved, they're also eligible for the job saver payment. And as we've been through before, this is at 40% of gross wages. So that means that when we look at their $11,500 a week of gross wages by 40%, that's $4,600 for each week of lockdown that they will be paid. So that is remitted on a fortnightly basis. And that will extend to the end of the lockdown, which at this date is set for 28th of August, and whether it's extended remains to be seen. So thirdly, just in relation to the 8 staff members, because they've been stood down, they've lost some work, as we can see. Now, they will be eligible to claim the COVID disaster payment. If it's up to 8 hours, as we can see there, they'll get 450. Or if they've lost more than 20 hours per week, they'll get the $750 per week COVID disaster payment. And please note that the director of a company that's an employing entity is also able to get that as well. So that's one example of an employing company. If we just go on to the next example there, Brent, we've got a smaller business in this case, which is what we call J&J Fabrications. They're a dad and mum partnership running a small welding fabrication business run by Jack and Jill Brown. So in this case, they don't have employees, but they've got some contractors. And then after the lockdown was announced back in June, they still had a few projects on the go. They're able to finish those off, and accordingly, they didn't have a reduction in turnover until the last 2 weeks of July. So in terms of the benefits for them, because they couldn't prove a 30% reduction between 26 June and 17 July, they won't get the COVID business grant. They're out of the loop for that. As we said earlier, the dates for eligibility there are set in stone, and there's no intention of changing those. Because their turnover reduction can still be demonstrated, they are going to be able to get job saver. But because they're a non-employing business, their job saver amount will be capped at $1,500 per week, and that'll be paid to them fortnightly. And as a result of that, because Jack and Jill's income primarily comes from the partnership and the business, and because they have claimed the job saver initiative, neither of them are going to be able to claim the COVID disaster payment. If you have a partnership or a sole trader type business, for the proprietors of that, it's typically one or the other that you would get COVID disaster payment or job saver if you're eligible. So I hope that helps to give some clarity as to how these things work in practice. What we can see is what each of these initiatives are intending to do. The COVID business grant being set to those earlier dates is broadly to give businesses a a quick cash flow boost if they were unfortunate enough to hit a turnover reduction to that extent that quickly. The COVID JobSaver initiative is designed to broadly to cover overheads that businesses will still incur throughout the lockdown period, and then the COVID disaster payment is designed to basically put food on the table of people who have broadly been stood down and have no income. One thing that's not to be confused is that last year we had the JobKeeper initiative, and it was a condition to keep that running that the JobKeeper was passed on to an employee. That's not the case with this initiative. This initiative needs the amount the government are paying for JobSaver is purely to cover the business overheads, because the COVID disaster payment has been put in to fund living costs for employees throughout this time that have been stood down. So, Brent, where to from here?
Thanks, Gavin. Yeah, look, obviously due to the number of queries that we've been getting through, we wanted to put this together just to really give people the tools to be able to lodge the claims themselves. Now, this is where you go. You apply via the website. However, for a lot of people, due to the different dates and the changes and things going through, haven't felt comfortable or confident to do those claims themselves. So if you feel as though you're not confident to prepare that, we are now able to do that for you. So as part of that, we'll help you establish your eligibility, provide advice on which claims can be applied for. We'll assist with preparing the accountant's letter and upload that documentation to Service New South Wales and lodge the claim application for you. So for the grant, and as Gavin just touched on, you may be eligible for one of the grants or both, and so we've got some different pricing for those there. Now, obviously, this will only be payable if we're able to get the grant for you. So if eligible, but this is really just about making sure that all the business that are eligible are able to claim, and no one's slipping through the cracks. So I guess that's our summary of the grants and where they are at the moment. Changes have been coming through thick and fast, so if there's any further changes, we'll be trying to get that out there, whether via the socials or on the email. So make sure you follow us. Now, we've had a few questions coming through, so I'll read those out and Gavin will address them now. So just if there's any other questions, pop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them. So a couple that have come through is, first one is, how does the primarily operating in New South Wales caveat work, Gavin?
Yeah, so the way that works is it broadly looks at the total labour cost for New South Wales. One thing that's a little unfair about the way that is structured is that the aggregated turnover list or test between, depending on which initiative we're looking at, take for example the small business grant, that works off there's obviously a $50 million turnover cap on that. One bad thing about it is that it looks at the national turnover of the claimant, not just at New South Wales. So the first thing to check would be, is our turnover low enough to be able to claim it? Once we have established that a claim can be made, we need to look at the New South Wales labour cost to see if that, and that's what it's based on. That's broadly how the caveats there work. And it also needs to be demonstrated that there is a business being carried on in New South Wales. and just sort of selling product to a lot of New South Wales customers from interstate won't quite cut it. They will ask for proof that there is a business being conducted, and they'll want things like utility bill type evidence, copy of lease agreement for premises and things like that to prove that that's the case.
Thanks for that. Next one we've got there is, what about not-for-profits?
Yep, they can claim as well, provided they can pass the same revenue type tests.
Yep. All right. And what time frame is the 40% of payroll based on?
Yeah, so there's two time frames available for that. So the first is for a smaller business that only has to withhold tax from wages and only has to pay that once a quarter. So for businesses that are withholding 25,000 a year or less, the wages are as per the March 2021 BAS. So we take the figure at W1 on the BAS, divide by 91 days and 90 days, and multiply by 7 to give us the weekly number. For businesses withholding more than 25,000 per year, they need to pay as you go withheld on a monthly basis. Where that's the case, it is done based on the May 2021 instalment activity statement.
That's good. All right. There's a couple of similar ones here.
Yep.
So just another one. Do we have to reapply for any of the grants?
No, we don't. So the COVID business grant is one-off. So once we get that, it's we've got it, and that's the end of the story. The Job Saver initiative will roll on at this stage until the 28th of August, with the weekly amount that you're entitled to being remitted to you each fortnight. At this stage, there's no indication that there's going to have to be that's anything apart from a set and forget arrangement. That said, there has been some thought that if the lockdown in New South Wales was extended, that it may be necessary to re-qualify, but that remains to be seen.
Yep. Another one is just, and this relates to the turnover one. Can we work this out on cash or accruals, or does it link back to how we lodge our BAS?
Yeah, so turnover is GST turnover, which is as per JobKeeper from last year, which means that the turnover test is according to how we account for GST in our business activity statement. So if that's on a cash received basis, that's how we look at it for the turnover test. If it's on the basis of accruals or invoices raised, we need to apply the same accounting method for calculating the decline in turnover as we use for our GST.
Yep. Now, can the owner-director claim the disaster payment also while his business is getting 40% of the wages, including his own?
Yes, correct. There's nothing to prevent that at all.
Yep. Now, I got another one here. I started a new business in December 2020 last year. Am I eligible to get the support payment, even if our earnings meet all the other criteria?
It depends what's meant by support payment. So the business grant, you would be able to get, provided that you can show that you've had a reduction in turnover between 26 June and 17 July. In that case, though, for an established business, you've got the option of looking at a fortnight period in 2019, 2020, or the fortnight prior to the lockdown. In a new business like this, the only option you would have would be to take the turnover test from the 11th of June to the 25th of June 2021, then compare that to a minimum fortnight period in the period 26 June to 17 July. If that gives you a turnover reduction, you'll get the COVID business grant. If it doesn't, you miss out on that altogether, but may be eligible for JobSaver provided you meet the other criteria for it.
Yep. Now, if we're still, we've submitted an application for a grant but haven't heard back, do you have any advice for those people that are still waiting?
First bit of advice about you're not alone, and there's a lot of people in that position. I think it can be followed up, but Services New South Wales have been fairly apologetic, we might say, due to the lack of payments going out and the time it's taking. The COVID disaster payment through the federal government is being paid quite quickly, but there's not a lot of joy as far as the time frame that's being taken for the Services New South Wales initiative to come through. So waiting a bit longer is probably the best bet, or you could go down a path of attempting to contact them and following it up, which could be a time-consuming exercise.
And what due dates are there for applications with the business grant and JobSaver?
Yeah, so the final date for that is the 18th of October 2021 will be the cut-off date for any of these things to be claimed by. That's at this point. I think if the lockdown was extended, we may see a amendment to that date, but that's purely speculative.
All right. Well, there's plenty of questions coming through. We'll be able to follow up. We'll be able to follow up with advice on any other questions. But by all means, feel free to reach out to us on the phone or via email. Details on the screen. We'll share some detailed slides and notes with all the attendees afterwards. With the detail of what we discussed today and around the eligibility and how to apply and who misses out. I want to thank everyone for their attendance today and really appreciate your time. Hopefully it's been of some use to help work your way through the different requirements.
Very good. Thanks, Brent. And we are aware there's a good number of questions we didn't get to just because of the number of them. But certainly thank you all for your participation, and we'll endeavour to get information back on those. And in the meantime, have a good afternoon and stay safe.
Thank you. Goodbye.